So right in front of me, I have the brand new MacBook Air 15, and when the rumors started hitting the market, the biggest concern to me at the time was that they were gonna make this a bit too heavy, because Apple typically uses a full aluminum chassis. It's not like a magnesium alloy, it's pure aluminum, and that's a bit thicker than most other laptops, and usually it adds a bit of weight, but they pulled through. You know, they've actually pulled through and created a 15-inch notebook that only weighs 3.3 pounds. That's incredible. The 13-inch, for example, weighs 2.7 pounds, so it's not much heavier. Now, it's not the lightest 15-inch notebook on the market as Apple claims. That definitely goes to the LG Super Slim, or LG Gram Super Slim rather. This is under 3 pounds, but when you touch this laptop, it's using a magnesium alloy and it kind of feels plasticky. It doesn't have the same sort of premium touch that these MacBook Airs have. And look, they actually kept the rigidity on the bigger version, because usually when you create a bigger product, you have to extend things. And you know, you'd be worried that the top lid would be a bit too squishy, but when you take the 13-inch notebook, it's literally identical in the terms of flexibility you have on top compared to the 15-inch model. And it's a bit thicker, like a tiny bit thicker. You'll never notice it unless you actually read the specs on Apple's website, but you can't notice it when both of these laptops are together and you're looking at them straight down. Now, if you actually take the MacBook Pro 16 and you put the 15-inch model in your hand, like this 16-inch notebook feels heavy compared to the 15-inch version. So that kind of shocked me. I was expecting the 15-inch to feel a lot closer to the 16-inch notebook, but I don't know, you put this in your hand and it feels like a big chonker compared to the 15-inch model. Even like the size of it, like the thickness of it rather. Like look how much thinner that 15-inch MacBook Air is. Now, in terms of what you get with it, it's pretty much identical. You have the exact same port lineup. So you have two Thunderbolt 4 ports on the left-hand side. You have your MagSafe connector, and of course you can spec it with a 35-watt charging brick, which will give you two Type-C ports, or if you want the 70-watt charging brick, you only get one Type-C port, but then you can fast charge your laptop. And then on the right-hand side, you have your audio jack. So very identical to the smaller version. You can still open it up with one hand like you can with any MacBook, and the biggest difference right off the bat when you open it up is the trackpad. This has a much bigger trackpad than the MacBook Air 13. It has to. Could you imagine if they kept the same size trackpad on the 15-inch version? It would just look comical, right? So they had to extend it, make it bigger so that everything has proper symmetry. The keyboard is the same, the typing experience is the same. If you've typed on the Air 13, then you're gonna be very familiar with the 15-inch version. Touch ID is at the top right-hand corner. The only difference is you get a lot more bezel on the keyboard deck with the 15-inch model, but that's kind of expected since you're using a bigger chassis. Now, the other area I was kind of worried about was the display. I thought they were gonna keep the same sort of resolution and put it on the 15-inch model. But the good news is they actually increased the resolution on the 15-inch version. I think it's 2880 by 1864 compared to 2560 to, I believe, 1664. They're not exact numbers, but they're pretty close. And the reason why they increased the resolution on the 15-inch version is to match the pixels per inch on the 13-inch version. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at this display or the 13-inch display, the pixel density is going to be identical. The panel is also very similar. It's an IPS panel, Apple calls it Retina, but you have the same sort of brightness, you have the same sort of color accuracy, and you have the same color gamut. These are fantastic displays. Obviously not as good as Apple's mini LED displays on the Pro models, but for an everyday notebook, for a student or someone who's working, these panels are fantastic. You also have the 1080p webcam at the top. There's no difference compared to the smaller version, so the way you look is gonna be the same on both of these models. But with the 15-inch model, you get something more. You get 6 speakers instead of 4. And I was actually kind of shocked how much better they sound compared to the smaller version. It just sounded a lot more fulfilling. There was more depth to the sound that I was listening to. In fact, the MacBook Air 13 speakers are really good, but beside these ones, like listening to these guys, they sounded a bit flatter. But the reason why I personally prefer the 15-inch model over the 13 is obviously screen real estate. Like if I can have a 15-inch display and not increase the weight by too much, Someone who's older like myself or just wants the biggest screen as possible in a light laptop will appreciate this. Like, I just can have more things on the display at a time compared to the 13-inch model. I don't have to squint as much. Everything is just much bigger. I can have, let's say, my taxes open, for example, expenses on one side, QuickBooks on the other, and it just makes looking back and forth easier instead of like having to scroll and go up and down on the web page with the 13-inch model. So if you're doing a lot of split screen, you'll appreciate the 15-inch model. I think personally, it really comes down to personal preference. Like, if you want the biggest screen possible, but want to travel as light as possible and you're using Mac OS, obviously the MacBook Air 15 makes more sense. But if you're someone who's like traveling constantly, wants a MacBook Air, then obviously the 13-inch model is gonna make a lot more sense for you. But performance, it's identical. They're both using the M2. I've done all the standard tests I do in every single video, and they're identical. There's really no difference in any application that I ran on both of these laptops. It's using an M2, 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU. You can spec it all the way up to 24 gigabytes of RAM. You can have up to 2 terabytes of storage, whatever you want. Even the drive speeds are identical on both laptops. So essentially, when it comes down to performance, you're not going to see an advantage going with the 15-inch version over the 13. The other big update is the battery size. This obviously has a bigger battery in it, but Apple rates it for 18 hours, just like the MacBook Air 13. And I've only had the laptop for 4 days so far. So I need more time to give you a better idea of how the battery life is. But so far, it feels pretty much identical to the MacBook Air 13, maybe a little bit better. Like, this is all day battery life. I don't have to worry about it. The beauty about these MacBook Airs and even the MacBook Pros is that it has some of the best idle time I've ever experienced on a laptop. Like, I can just leave it shut, come back to this laptop 3-4 days later, and I'll only lose like 2 to 3% battery life. Whereas with other laptops that I've used in the past, I'll drain like 10 to 15%. I also love the fact that I don't have to have it plugged in all the time. That's one of the biggest complaints I have with some Windows laptops. If you want full performance, you gotta keep it connected to the wall. This guy can literally sit on battery and give you identical performance no matter how hard you're pushing it, and that's kind of special. But the big question, should you upgrade from the MacBook Air 13 to the 15-inch model? The answer is obviously no. Your MacBook Air 13 is fantastic. Even if you get a good deal on them M1 still, like, those are still fantastic products. I don't even think you need to upgrade to M2, but if you're someone who's coming in and buying a laptop today, if it's for school or for work or general productivity, I'd highly consider the MacBook Air 15. It does cost a couple of $100 more, but you do get a bigger display and better speakers. And I think for a lot of people, that's worth the extra $200, because if you're using this day in, day out, 3.3 pounds is not that heavy, especially in a 15-inch notebook, and you're really gonna appreciate that bigger display. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.